Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. Today we welcome a very special guest, and that is Giordano, who's the founder of The Juice Media. You guys have been producing some brilliant content, bringing back honesty and satire to the Australian media, I guess. So thanks so much for joining us firstly, and maybe give people a bit of a background about what you guys do and how you got into it all, Giordano.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on, Alex. It's good to finally make this happen.
Yeah.
So I run a satirical channel called The Juice Media, and we've focused on making a series where we impersonate governments, mainly the Australian government, but we've done others as well.
Yeah.
We just the idea being it's very simple, and I think the reason it resonates with a lot of people is that people are really tired of bullshit from our elected representatives. It's just gotten to the level of, as a lot of people say, it's kind of like it's almost satirical. Reality is basically satirical, and it's kind of like people are really starved of just cutting through that nonsense and actually getting back to very sort of simple, honest truths about what's going on. So the ads that we make are basically the premise is if the government was honest about this policy or this law or this, whatever, this event or whatever, it can be a public holiday or whatever. If it was an honest tourism ad, even if it was honest, what would it say? And that's basically the premise, and it's resonated really strongly with people. So we started maybe 3.5 years ago, and we've now made about 40 something of these videos, and it's kind of taken on a life of its own.
Yeah, and what was that breakout point? I mean, I was looking through the YouTube statistics, and I think was it 2 years ago when it just really exploded? Was that one video in particular, or how did that all happen? Because you guys have got over 250,000 subscribers now.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of been a steady increase, but I think there's been a few points, and probably the first one was about 2 years ago in 2017, mid 2017, when the government decided to write us a letter. It was the Department of the Prime Minister, so right from the top.
Yes.
Some idiot wrote us an email saying, it's come to our attention that you've been using the coat of arms, the Australian coat of arms, and no, he didn't call it the coat of arms. He called it our logo, which sounds very corporate. I don't know. That's the language that was used.
Yeah.
And the concern for us is that your videos might be confused with actual government communications. And seriously, when I first saw this email, I was like, this must be a joke. It's like, yeah, right. That's very funny. Good one.
Yeah.
But no, sure enough, it was from pmc.gov.au, and it was signed off by the. There wasn't a name of a person. It was just a title, which is a National Symbols Officer, which is an office that no one seems to have ever heard about. So I promptly put that email on Twitter, on social media, and quite a few journalists were interested. And then they asked me for, I think I just tweeted that this happened, and they said, "Oh, have you got the email?" And so I put the email up, and that generated quite a lot of interest. And then pretty much our response was to make a video impersonating the government, telling people, not to impersonate the government, because we thought that would be quite meta and quite fun to do. And people just loved that cheekiness. I think people were like, they saw it as a bit of an encroachment on satire and on, I suppose, free speech. The right to make fun of governments was being sort of trodden upon. But I have to say, so I guess that was like, a point that we really kind of like jumped up a bit. I think governments should know better that, the best response to this kind of thing is just to shut up and just ignore it, because the minute they try to sort of come down on something, you make it much more popular.
That was probably a talking point I did have, was about the Quiet Australia policy and some of the whistleblower policies they have now. I think there's a few YouTube videos of senators or the Parliament actually talking about your letter and what happened, and saying, come on guys, we're basically banning criticism in the media. So I guess, what are your thoughts about all those type of things that are happening in Australia, particularly the whistleblower cases?
Yeah, I mean, what happened to us is a very kind of mild, minor manifestation of what's happening in Australia. What you were referring to with the senators was the next step in the thing was after we received that email. In fact, I think only a week after the government introduced a bill to amend the criminal code to make it illegal to impersonate the government. And not claiming that they did this solely because of us. I think there were other things. There was the so-called Mediscare labor stunt that pissed off the government. And anyway, it is a good idea to make sure that people can't impersonate the government. But the whole thing was like, okay, well, will this will this net also capture people who are doing it in good faith, such as satirists? And so there was a clause, an exemption. So the bill would punish people with up to 5 years of prison. So it's a hefty piece of legislation.
Yeah.
But the exemption was it would exempt you as long as it was for the purposes of genuine satire. So that was another funny formulation, because who decides what's genuine satire and what's not, and what is non-genuine satire? Yes. And so the Greens, there was, as always, when there's a bill like this, there was a Senate committee hearing, and Nick McKim, who's the Green senator for Tasmania, showed our logo, lifted that up and gave a copy of it to the Attorney General, George Brandis. And there was a big debate, which really was very funny. It was like a Clark and Dawes skit between George Brandis and Senator McKim, which we uploaded. That's genuine satire. Like, that's like, no one wrote it. It's just beautiful. And George Brandis was saying bullshit like, well, if you look at it carefully, yes, you can see it's satire, but if I got it in my letterbox, you might confuse it, with something else. So again, we made another video parodying that. But all of this is it's fun and games kind of thing compared to what's actually going on at other levels. So the year after that, government introduced the Assistance and Access Bill, which we dubbed the Arse Access Bill, and that's kind of another attack on encryption, on end-to-end encryption. I won't go into the details of it, but I suppose the takeaway message is that this legislation is a threat, basically, to everything that relies on solid encryption. That includes everything from banking to communications, and obviously personal privacy.
Yeah, we did cover that in a fair bit of detail at the time.
Right. Yeah, good. And there's good reason to think that the reason that this legislation was introduced in Australia was because we lack a Bill of Rights in this country. And whereas in the United States or in other places, it would have been quite a rigmarole to try and integrate this kind of infringement of personal liberties with the Constitution. Here, it's like, yeah, cool, no worries. There's nothing really that stops that. And of course, Australia is part of the Five Eyes Alliance, and they all share information. So it's kind of like, let's introduce this legislation here in Australia so that we can use Australian laws to basically interfere with encryption, or weaken encryption protection, so that we can use that. And then, of course, via that entry point, you can access devices of people in the United States and Canada, the other Five Eyes Alliance members, New Zealand and the UK. So it's an international issue. A lot of people think this is an Australian problem, but it's actually an international problem. And it feels like the different Five Eyes members take turns in very strategically chipping away at the protections that we have as individuals on the internet, and strategically, so that they can all benefit from these various things, rather than one. The UK had the Snoopers Act, and then New Zealand will follow with something else, and then Australia will introduce another piece of legislation. Whereas if one country did it all by itself, it would seem like, shit, this country is really becoming an authoritarian Big Brother state. But because everyone's kind of doing it bit by bit, it seems more diffused. But definitely we were trying to paint that picture and saying, hey, this is something that affects everyone in these countries.
Yeah, and we've actually seen Australia get downgraded in terms of its freedom, civil liberties, different groups and the studies they do recently. That's probably the biggest worry for me. I'm not sure if it's just from my perspective in the last 5 years. When did Australia go from this lucky country, very free and open, to all of a sudden it seems like we're being as heavily surveilled as somewhere like China and whatnot. And I don't think there's increased crime, or they're not protecting us from increasing threats. It doesn't seem like there's any logic behind this, but we really like the test bed of, okay, how can we monitor and surveil everything they do? And that leads into, phasing out cash and the next things on the horizon.
Yeah, I mean, China's definitely worse. I mean that's truly scary that you have the a state of the art technology, sort of like the best technology that there is, combined with a truly authoritarian, not even trying to disguise it really. The level of monitoring of populations is just lends itself perfectly to absolutely totalitarian regimes, and what we're seeing in the Sichuan region with the Uyghurs who are being detained, millions of people in camps. I have a friend who's just recently been to that region, and they came back, and it's like there are video cameras everywhere. Every second block there's a police station. Police check basically. It can be a big one or it can be a fairly small one, but it's just pervasive everywhere you go. The level there of surveillance is just something else. But it serves as a warning, I suppose, for all other countries that value, the rights that we have to not being in a police state.
Yeah, it doesn't happen overnight, but it slowly happens, right. I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I feel I don't know. I'm not sure what the answer is either. I feel like that there is a sense that power just breeds a need for more power, and there's this sort of sense of insecurity. Yes, we have this level of access, but we don't know. We can't access people's private messages because of encryption. We need to deal with that, even though the record shows that most of the times crimes and terrorist attacks aren't foiled by monitoring these encrypted chats. It's through other means, because any terrorist who is worth their salt knows how to avoid channels that are open to being monitored and busted. Yeah. So really, it affects people who, as I say, they have nothing to hide, but all of a sudden, we've all lost this inherent right. Which, and I suppose I say it's inherent, but it's not codified anyway. We have to say that we have a right to privacy, and we have to fight for it, because it's not, rights don't just they're not something we're born with around our neck and it says, hey, I have a right to privacy. Yeah. Do we want a right to privacy? That's the big question, is do Australians, do people in in the world care about these rights? Because if we do, then we have to say something, because every year we are losing a bit more of that. That's a really important question to ask, is do people actually care about these things?
I think people watching our channels do, but 90% of people don't, unfortunately. But switching gears, I know you covered a lot about the election and the housing market. It was actually a really interesting year when you look back on it now. What are your thoughts around all that? The economy, we cover all these things, and it's all sort of interrelated. And it just seems like there's no real direction from Canberra now. And people were saying it's the unlosable election for Labor, and then the people feel like there's no real genuine leader that's going to take us in a great direction.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like that might be a good thing as well. Yeah. I feel like the age of leaders. I don't know. There's just, I mean, look, it's not like we don't have good people. We have good people, but we seem to always elect the least qualified, the least competent, the least trustworthy individuals. I mean, election after election, not just in Australia. You just have to wonder what's going on. But at the same time, we're seeing also, amazing newer generation of people getting involved in politics. And, I'm speaking mainly about the USA, but it would be great to see, a new generation of, massive Western Australian bug just flew in my face. It'll be really good to see a new generation of fired up people getting involved here in Australian politics. And I think the school strike for climate is such a healthy development. It's kind of it's going to take a few years for the kids who are organising those events, but there you have people, kids, whether they like it or not, children are now political activists because they're fighting for their future. they're fighting for their survival in what's now almost globally. I mean, Australia kind of feels different because our government is a bunch of climate change deniers, but there is a global climate emergency, and kids are aware of it, and it's almost like they've been signed up for a political existence, So I think we're going to see a lot of people, a lot of the young organizers of these rallies and strikes getting involved in politics, I hope, and seeing a new generation that will breed leaders that we can be truly, happy to vote for, and people who can actually lead. Like, for example, we've seen Scott Morrison's reaction in the middle of these tragic bushfires. Which, yes, we have bushfires every year, but the intensity and the length and the magnitude and the aggressiveness of these fires is a result of climate change. And we have a leader who's incapable of leading in that regard, because he's not the right person for this era. So hopefully we'll see that change. And I think these fires, I hope these fires will be a turning point, a point at which there's a light bulb that goes on, and more Australians start to really have an emotional and sort of like more caring about who is in charge, who is at the helm of this ship, because we just saw that when shit hits the fan and stuff gets nasty, the people at the top, the Prime Minister, did fuck all. He went on holiday to Hawaii. There was no one there to help. It's people are left to their own devices, and that's really scary. And I think that opened a lot of people's eyes, because everyone thinks, oh no, the government will take care of it. They're in charge. They're in control.
Yeah, and I don't want to make this a climate change video, because the comments just light up and people never agree on what's going on. But as you said, after the Royal Commission, and then the banks were in the headlines again this year with the 23 million breaches of this, that, and the other. If that wasn't going to get people fired up and upset, I don't know what will. And I think it's because it's intertwined with the banks and the government and the housing market. We kind of can't actually let the truth get out there, because the reality is the property market probably goes a bit lower in terms of valuations because of everything that was happening. So they've kind of got to fudge their way through this and pretend that everything's great, and they don't want the banks going down or the housing market going down, and that all comes from Canberra, really. I suppose so. Yeah, they can't be. Yeah, I suppose there's some sort of unwritten law that says you can't panic, because otherwise the house of cards kind of can, if one card falls, then a whole bunch of others do as well. Yeah.
So I suppose that's definitely a concern as well, but. Yeah.
Other videos you've touched on recently, inequality. That's something that we do see, I guess, worldwide now. The rich are getting richer, and again, I think it comes back to the economy just not being as efficient or as well run, and there's so many benefits and loopholes for the wealthy and whatnot. And are people becoming more aware of these things, or what do you see happening in 2020? Are people going to become aware of these issues and put on yellow vests, or is it much of the same?
I have no idea. I'm really bad at predictions. I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's good to be pessimistic intellectually and optimistic in the heart.
Yeah.
But I don't know that. I don't want to underestimate. Because we make, you've got an audience of, I'm not sure, probably a decent sized audience, and so do we, but it pales in comparison to the forces of bullshit and misinformation that own the major newspapers. And here, I've been here in Perth, and I've had a chance to sort of sit down at cafes and just kind of people watch, and people walk into these cafes and they walk out with a copy of the West Australian and the Australian. I'm like, oh my God, it's like, we're kind of a little bit cocooned at home back in Melbourne, in our area of Melbourne. Yeah. And we kind of tend to think, people are getting their information online from alternative news sources, but there are still a lot of people that are very much reading and following what is basically a mafia for vested interests for, here in Australia, at least for mining companies and fossil fuel companies. and other big moneyed interests, the gambling lobbies and so on,
Yeah.
which control both major parties. It's very entrenched. I'm often accused of being a Labour supporter, but I have a lot of criticism for the Labour Party as well for taking donations from fossil fuel companies and gambling lobbies. And even though I think Labour government would have had a better climate policy, they kind of went to the election with a policy of fracking the shit out of the Northern Territory. It's like, they both are compromised from that point of view. So unless we start to see a real understanding of alternatives to the two major parties, which can be other parties or it can be independent candidates as well, and then also of how the voting system works, the preferential system voting works, which we made a video about preferential voting to try and explain in very basic terms why it's such a good system.
Yeah.
So but I suppose if people haven't seen it and listening to this, check it out. But yeah, those kind of things go hand in hand. There's a lot of work to be done to really educate people about the systems that we have all the things in place to fix the kind of things that we want. We know that we need a federal ICAC, for example, a National Integrity Commission to deal with an independent commission that can deal with the constant cases of corruption and blatant bullshit and lying. Like look at what Angus Taylor has been going through. These cases are then referred to the very same agency. They're basically investigating themselves. Home Affairs is a shit show. Everything's combined together. So if ASIO, there's a problem at ASIO, the AFP will investigate ASIO, but the AFP is under Home Affairs. So at the end of the day, Peter Dutton, it's just, it's a joke. There's no accountability. So we know what we need. It's just a case of, are enough people aware of that? We need to get people, more interested in alternative sources of information. So that's where we're working and, trying to make it fun also to keep up to date with everything that's going on. From a black comedy perspective, you can kind of see the tragic humor in all of it as well. We try to kind of people laughing, because laughing is also a really good way of dealing with all the bullshit. It can be overwhelming otherwise. So that's why I've chosen this approach. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that answers the question. I feel like there's a lot of work to go, and I'm not sure that we're not going to make the same mistakes going forward.
That's right.
Yeah,
you guys can do your best to change things one video at a time, which I think is a great way to do it. What videos do you have? Any topics on your list you really want to cover, or most important things that we haven't spoken about today that you want to mention?
You mean going forward?
Just topics in general that you think are really relevant for Australia that you might do videos on, or just things you want to discuss?
Look, regarding Australia, where do you start? I mean, we've just been on an enforced break. I really would have liked to have made a video about the fires, the fire situation, and all the stuff going on. I guess we're going to pick up wherever we are when we start making videos again. We're just going to jump on and see what's happening then. Probably the first thing that we're going to try and cover is the situation with Julian Assange, because his extradition hearing, the first extradition hearing, probably the first of many, will be happening on the 24th of February or thereabouts, end of February. And that's a really big case, and it's an issue that we've been covering from the very beginning of the Juice Media, when we did a collaboration. We had Julian when he was free. We got him to do a cameo on one of our Rap News episodes, and so we've always been associated with the WikiLeaks story, and we've kept on covering it. Yeah. So that's probably something. And I think that the key message that we really want to reiterate there is that we're talking about a publisher. Whether you want to call him a journalist or a publisher, he is. That's what he is. He shouldn't be misrepresented as a hacker, and therefore not privy to the protections of First Amendment rights in the US under the Constitution, which protects freedom of the press. And also the fact that it'll set such a huge precedent for enabling and allowing attacks on journalists and publishers, which kind of brings us back to what we were talking about at the beginning with the whole Quiet Australia policy, a big part of which is crackdowns on whistleblowers and journalists who report on stories where their sources are whistleblowers.
Yeah.
That's their job. That is good journalism. That's what you want journalists to do. And slowly the culture, the rhetoric is trying to the political rhetoric that we're hearing from Washington, from Canberra, is that these journalists are somehow breaking the law by reporting on leaks that they receive from whistleblowers. Yeah. That's exactly what Julian Assange did. It's exactly what the journalists here in Australia who've been raided, including the ABC, for reporting on stories where the sources were whistleblowers. So that's a really important story. I'm also really keen to look at quite a range of international stories. Probably the one that I'm really keen on is right now there is a major standoff about to happen in British Columbia between the Wet'suwet'en Nation and the Canadian government, which is trying to lay down pipelines. Basically more pipelines to carry oil, and this is an indigenous nation which, unlike Australia, where Aboriginal people have never had the benefit of treaties between the settlers and Aboriginal nations. In Canada, tribes there actually negotiated treaties, so they actually have, the courts in Canada have said, yes, this is your land, this is your sovereign territory, and it just shows that even when you have that, the colonial state doesn't really give a shit. They're still trying to basically push these people off in the national interest, and there's a major fight about to take place there. So I'm in touch with some of the people on the ground there, and they're really keen to collaborate on that story. We've been asked to make honest government ads. Every day I get emails from people all over the place, from whether it's Brazil or Trinidad and Tobago to China or just there's very few countries that we haven't had people write to us and say, please, can you make a video about what's happening here? I just can't possibly keep up with all the government bullshit in the world, but I would like to do a few more international collaborations.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, I do look forward to those. It's been fantastic having you on today, Giordano. You guys do great work. I'll put the links in the description below to follow your channel and how to support the guys as well. But any final words for people at home?
No, thanks for being interested in what's happening in the world. Thanks for being engaged. I think everyone who's, like yourself, Alex, who's putting time into helping to inform people, and, rather than being a cog in the machine, you're doing a service to society. So thanks, Alex, and thanks all the people, that are tuning in and basically give a shit, about what's going on. So,
fantastic. Good place to finish. So thanks again for coming on, mate, and we'll talk again soon.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Cheers, guys.